Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Hanging Out with Nolan Hong. And this week on the podcast, I have a wonderful guest that I've been super excited to have on here. She's introduced to me by our dear friend to the show and friend to myself, Dr. Rachel, who is on a previous episode. And when she described this guest, I was like, I need to have this person on the podcast because she sounds amazing and fantastic. She is an artist. She is an art teacher. She also teaches people how to do art therapy. And in the short time that I did get to meet her prior to this, she's just been so fascinating. And I cannot wait to hear her stories. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest, Nadia Fairlamb.
Thank you.
Yay! One of these days, I'm going to get the timing on that right. I always have this awkward 1 second or 2 second delay. This crowd has to get cheering earlier, people. Come on.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. That was great. I haven't had a cheer like that in a while.
Nadia, thank you so much for jumping on here. It's not often that, like, I'll meet somebody for the first time and then the very next thing I say is, hey, I know we just met, but would you mind being on my podcast and sharing your life story to a bunch of strangers? And that a person would go, yeah, that sounds great. But here we are.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's sweet to be here.
So I wanted to start off by asking, I know that we introduced you as an artist, but as we all know, art takes so many different forms and there's so many different types of art. How would you describe your type of art and the type of work that you dabble in and such?
Right. Yeah. So right now I call myself an artist and I specialize in wood sculpture, but I'm also trained in painting and drawing, illustrating, ceramics and other forms of sculpture too. So to me, I focus on the wood sculpture right now.
Mm-hmm.
But anything that I can get my hands on, I will make.
So what is it about working with wood and doing wood sculpturing that, is drawing you to that, knowing that you have such an eclectic background and expertise in so many different fields? Why woodworking that kind of is where you've been kind of putting your focus and energy?
Yeah, that's a great way to start this whole thing. When I moved, well, backtrack just a tiny bit. I did get a degree in ceramic sculpture in college.
Oh.
So I 6 years in art school. And when I left art school, I always thought I would get right into having a ceramic studio. Things happened, life happened. Then I moved to Hawaii and thought, okay, great. I'll start the art and I'll start a ceramic studio. A little bit naive about the economy when I moved here and not understanding fully as a new person what it takes to live in Hawaii. I couldn't afford the kiln or the electricity or the equipment. So I wasn't able to do what I loved, which was the ceramics. And I had a really close, very dear friend of mine. I consider him an angel now. I was helping him with a construction project because I needed work at the time. And he came up to me one day and he handed me some power tools and he handed me some wood and he said, you're kind of driving us crazy. You need to do something. So I fortunately had the awareness to see it as I've got a lot of life energy that needs to move out of my body and through my hands. And if I'm not using my hands, sometimes I'm not so okay up here, not as healthy as I could be. So that's why, really the only reason why I started into woodworking. Wood was never a subject in college that I liked. I got one wood sculpture class and the rest of the woodworking I ever experienced was on archaeology digs where we would need to build, we would need to build structures. And that's how I understood many of the properties of working with wood.
Wow.
Yeah.
What kind of things were they digging up at these archaeological sites?
Yeah, so I went to school in Central Texas. So our focus was, well, a lot of South and Central American archaeology, Midwest, New Mexico, Arizona, and then all throughout Texas, and Louisiana.
Wow.
So part of field school, being in college, I got a double degree. I was one of those people, I would have stayed in college forever. So I got a degree in art and archaeology. And I was also looking at astronomy, but my parents cut me off at that point. Like, no, you got to go out and do something else. So I, yeah, so the field schools, you go to field school, and on the digs, you have to build your own latrines and showers, and sometimes even
Wow.
places to eat. And, because it's out in the middle of wherever remote location. So the first field school I went to was in Gila National Forest in western New Mexico. And we were excavating some Southwest Indian tribes. The tribe itself is called the Mogollon. They're kind of, they, I guess you could say the closest to it would be what people would consider the Navajo tribes.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
they were a little sedentary. I could go kind of nerd out and geek out on this so forever if you want. We can go this route, but that's basically how I started understanding how to work with wood.
Well, you know what? You can geek out and take us down this road as much as you want, because
Rabbit hole. Okay, good.
guarantee we have and I'm pretty sure many of our listeners have never heard these things and learn, and this is fascinating to us. So to get this
Okay.
type of peek into a world that is so
Yeah,
foreign, this would be
and
fantastic.
on the mainland, there's so much more variation when it comes to archaeology because it's a larger landmass.
Yeah.
There are more varied cultures from, all the way from Alaska all the way down to the tip of South America. There's a lot of a lot of history over there. So it's a little bit more singular here based
Hmm.
on the culture that's here.
Yeah.
So
A
I
much smaller area too,
yeah, and
right?
it's really much more compact. And in
Yeah.
certain areas on the mainland, a lot of artifacts and a lot of sites are intact in more desert areas because it's very dry and arid and things don't rot or mold or fall apart. So the archaeology that
Gotcha.
I did when I was in college was southwestern archaeology, and also so this was everything from New Mexico over to Arizona, and then Central America down in Belize. So these were the Gila, Mogollon cultures. Central America, this was the Maya. And then
Mm.
in East Texas, it was the Caddo Indian tribes. So
Ah.
it's just and the gorgeous, wonderful thing about that in college is when I was in college and I fell in love with ceramics and working with clay. At the same time, I was in the archaeology school too, and I volunteered for a while in the archaeology lab. That means when artifacts come back from the digs that the university does, any artifacts, they need to be cleaned or reconstructed, put back together, labeled, and then bagged, and then all of this is archival. So all the bagging, tagging, all that stuff, it can't rot. It can't have any acids in it. I can go down
Oh
that rabbit
wow.
hole forever too. So that's what I did. And I wanted to be there. So this is so great. I get to play with all these stone tools and what you would call, arrow points or
Mm.
manos and matates, grinding stones and tools. And the woman that ran the lab asked what I did. I told her I was in the ceramics department. And she goes, "This is great. We need somebody to reconstruct these ceramic pots that
Ah.
all fell, when you dig up these sites, there's
Hmm.
artifacts, and a lot of times they're broken and they've got to be put back together." So I stumbled upon a profession, which was I was then hired by different companies to illustrate artifacts, like to draw them by hand for scientific journals, and then to reconstruct them. So I
Wow.
did this while I was in college, while I was getting both of my degrees. And I remember the one day when I got this opportunity to illustrate an entire burial site worth of artifacts in East Texas. This is a Caddo Indian nation, Caddo Indian tribe. That particular tribe and that nation is still they're still alive. It's not an extinct culture.
Mm.
It still has a language that continues. I wouldn't say it's very robust, but it's still, they're still there.
Yeah.
And so this had to be excavated. I think there were, I don't even remember, over 10, 20 pots, like ceramic vessels,
Hmm.
that when these people were buried, burial objects were put in with them, whether it was stone tools or pots or food or jewelry. This particular culture, they buried a lot of pottery with
Mm.
their ancestors. And so I got the opportunity to, I didn't do the archaeology dig, but they brought it all back to the lab. I got to clean it up. I got to glue these things back together. I got to see the people's fingerprints on these pots, right? Because it's
Wow.
clay and you record. And this was, I think, about 900 years old.
Holy
Not
smokes.
that old, and in the grand scheme of things with
But still, my
archaeology.
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some of the oldest pottery found is 10 to 12,000 years old on
Oh
the planet.
gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Some of the oldest stuff. I haven't had the luck to play with that stuff, but that's a whole other
Yeah.
story. So yeah, I got to piece all of these things back together and then illustrate them. The shape, the outline, the
Mm.
decor, the decoration on the outside, right? And it's just like looking at somebody's arm when you look at their armband tattoo, if you were to
Uh-huh.
peel that thing off and lay it out flat.
Oh, I
That's what
see.
I had
Okay.
to do visually, is like peel it off a
Wow.
round surface, mentally
Yeah.
lay it out flat and describe all the different details so they could see where it fits in culturally, on a timeline, on a scale. And then all of those were published in different scientific journals.
My goodness. So, you're talking about the burial sites and how they're buried with the pottery and stuff. Were they buried in some kind of like casket or something to protect it, or was it just that they were put into the ground with these items, and then the dirt covers them?
I don't, because I wasn't on that site, I don't recall if that culture does any kind of shrouding, but I don't
Mm,
believe they use any hard surface to
I
bury
see.
somebody in. So it's not like a pharaoh or a king in Egypt, which was
Yeah.
intentionally interred, mummified, but in a stone coffin or stone crypt, right?
Yeah.
In these were more agrarian peoples.
Mm,
So maybe not even hunter gatherers, but they were more farmers. So
hmm.
I think that they were just interned straight in the ground.
Wow.
Yep.
So, what would I mean? I'm sure there's just so many things, but are there any things that you worked on that just kind of really stood out to you that were just like, wow, this is pretty amazing, or something that really felt
Yeah.
special to you?
Well, that particular collection of pottery, that was unique to have so many almost complete pots in a one small location. For them to have found that was pretty unique. So that was very special to work on that, and also because to see these fingerprints of
Yeah.
these people making these things at the same time while I was in a ceramics department making them myself. So I
Right.
could reconstruct these things with my own hands and be, oh, well, of course the thumbprint's going to be right there. That was one thing that stood out. Another one that stood out was when I was in New Mexico. We were working on this southwestern tribes, and we excavated what's called a kiva, Kiva, which is a ceremonial structure. It's what we would consider today a church or a temple, a synagogue, a mosque. So it was their version of a sacred structure where they
Mm,
would do their ceremonies. And the kiva, if you think about the ground, it's buried partially below ground. And traditionally, it had an arched roof or a wood, like wood roof over the top.
hmm.
And it's kind of suppressed down and you could sit down at the bottom. It's meant to be slightly buried into the earth. And I don't remember the stories why. I should look back at that. It's been a little while. I know there's probably creation stories or spiritual stories that they had. So I got to work on that site and help excavate it. And it was at the top of this big mound in the middle of the desert out in New Mexico, right? So it's hotter than blazes out there in the summertime, and your skin just shrivels up. Your fingers bleed after a couple of days because it's so dry.
Oh man.
So we got to excavate that, and we got to find all the artifacts that were in there. And to be up at the top of this mound and this hill to look out and to see, what they would have seen, because it hadn't changed that much in terms of the landscape. But then, and then right after that, as we were excavating, we got to go to a place in northwestern New Mexico, and it's called Chaco Canyon. Mm-hmm. If you've ever heard of this, it's fairly large, deep canyon. And it was, if you think about a place where there's a whole bunch of churches packed together from different kind of religions, but it's all, let's say, Christian churches, and there's 5 of them on one block, like we have here or in other places. It's kind of what you would consider that to be. It's a concentrated site of spiritual buildings or significantly religious structures for all of these different cultures. And it was like a meeting point for different cultures to come in. And that place was incredible because that was where there were loads of petroglyphs and pictographs and sun markers. So all the kivas, their doors and their windows are set exactly to the solstices, like the winter solstice and the summer solstice, right? So we got to sit on those kivas on the summer solstice to watch the sun rise and come through these doors.
Whoa.
So they're also, celestially aligned too. That's very significant. And there's some sites in Chaco Canyon. Like I said, I can totally geek out on this. In Chaco Canyon, where there's what we would consider nowadays like astronomy sites. So they'd figure out exactly where this tiny little cleft is with a canyon. And when the sun shines exactly through that cleft, that it's exactly at the summer solstice or the winter solstice. And it's called a sun dagger. So if you think of a tiny little, space between 2 really big rocks, right? And if the sun shines right through there, it casts a sliver of sunlight on a wall. Oh. And that bisected rock art that they did, some carvings of spirals in the wall. So if your culture is based agriculturally, you need to know when the summer and the winter solstices are, so you can count before and after, where your planting cycles are.
Right.
So that was, of course, that was a highlight to get to be there during the summer solstice for that. Yeah. And then
how come that, I mean, it sounds like such a magical place and that there's so much put into it. Why was it, I guess, no longer inhabited? Like, do you know what the backstory is what happened to all the people?
That was mostly the natural shifting of nature. That area several thousand years ago in northwestern New Mexico was a lot more lush. So there was more plants and more animals. And as that part of the country shifted naturally into a more desert area, less water, less able to plant, you can't feed as many people, and people have to disperse or they die.
That makes sense.
I believe that was what different scientists discovered about that. But it's an incredible site. You should check it out. Chaco Canyon. It's just full of these different, my cat's back there. It's full of all of these different kivas, these temples that are half submerged underground, and it's loaded with ceremonial sites. Incredible place. And it's kind of at the bottom of 2 cliff walls, and it runs down a canyon. And the way before there were roads to get up and down were stairs, but these stairs are like that big, just barely enough for your foot. So if you're climbing up these 1,000-foot plus walls on these tiny little stairs,
And
It's unbelievable.
if you slip up, you're toast probably, huh?
Something I don't, yeah, maybe your nervous system and your, vestibular system was different and you had better balance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so those are two of those stories. And then I did do archaeology in Central America too, in Belize. I was
Wow.
invited down for a little while to do some art and some of the digs. And then just recently, last year, I went to Baja, Mexico to go see some rock art sites in central Baja. And my cat is about to come for a visit. Yes, please don't step on the
Hello,
keyboard.
cat. What? If we get disconnected, we know who to blame.
Yeah, you can blame the kitty. He's looking for a place to snuggle. So yeah, that's the background of some of my crazy adventures.
That is fascinating. And I'm going to ask you a question. And I'm sorry if it's a weird, silly question, but seeing that you've worked a lot in the deserts in New Mexico, the next thought that goes to my mind is, oh, that's where all like, the UFO sightings and things like that. Have you ever, either through things that you've dug through, art that you've seen, or maybe even strange things while being on the site, have you ever had any reason to think that there is something to all of these claims of, UFO activity in these desert
I,
areas?
I could see how some people would think that in certain places. If if you look at the art of extinct cultures,
Uh-huh.
let's say, for example, the Mayan cultures, their art is all rock carvings or paintings, extremely elaborate, massive, and and sometimes extremely difficult to translate into what we understand.
Oh.
If you're lucky enough to still have any native peoples that are still alive to translate that for you, that have
Hmm.
not been affected by any modern cultures. So
Um,
I myself prefer to look at things scientifically, to look for like actual facts
yeah.
rather than be like, oh, a UFO could have landed here. I don't know. Maybe other, beings from outside of this planet have come to say hello and drop things off for us and given us treats and things. Maybe not. I don't know. I think humanity within of itself is majestic enough without any other outside influence. But I could see how several in Egypt, it's not a rock art site. In several temple areas on the pictographs,
Mm,
the images that they paint and draw and sculpt, and the Maya, I could see how somebody would see something there,
gotcha.
the form of a spaceship or a computer panel or something that's not of this world.
Yeah.
Yeah. I myself haven't experienced anything extraterrestrial. I have experienced a few definitely dead terrestrial things coming to say hi,
Mm,
but I think a lot of sensitive people can experience stuff like that.
yeah. Well, thank you for what is that? Uh, Entertaining that odd question.
Entertaining my thought, yeah.
um, but you're mentioning how you went into college to pursue art, and you even mentioned how your parents like, okay, that's enough. But what was it about art? Like, where did that start from for you? I assume at a early age that got you to this path of pursuing it as a passion and as a career.
Yeah. So I, at 3 years old, like every 3-year old on the planet, was an extremely creative, playful creature.
Hmm.
And every child creates and makes art. And then at some point, their brains and their bodies, their hormones shift out of that. But as I grew up, I was always painting, drawing, playing, making something with my hands, always, always, always. And my mother encouraged that a lot because that was
Hmm.
my go-to place. I would, whenever I had spare time, paint, draw, play with stuff. I was that kind of kid. I would rather be making art than watching TV. Sometimes not even going outside to play. So, um, And then in junior high, I found the art department and was captivated by all the stuff. And in high school, I found the art department and was totally fell in love with the art there. And I won awards in high school, and I illustrated poetry books and did all sorts of stuff like that. And I knew that when I went to college, I decided, I'm going to be a grown up person and I'm going to get a degree in, what do you call it? Environmental science of all things. I spent half a semester in environmental science and wanted to die. I walked into the art department and realized, oh, thank God I'm home. So, and then when I found ceramics, it was just, I didn't fall in love with a person. I fell in love with ceramics. So that was my first love, was art. And so it was always an outlet. Like I said at the very beginning, like what my friend said, it was always a way to keep myself, to let that creative energy move through me. If it sticks in here for too long, it's just not, for me, it's just not healthy. It's got to move out. So,
yeah, that's so interesting. And how did you kind of realize that recognize that keeping that creative energy bottled up wasn't healthy for you? And how did you kind of be able to make that connection of this is how it has to be, like this is the healthy way for me to kind of keep this energy going? Because for a lot
yeah,
of people it might be hard to recognize and understand
you might
and come to that,
not
right?
even know.
Yeah.
It was through, I would say, two major experiences in life showed me that. One, I actually was in art school at the time, and I was directing stuff out of my hands, and it was another one of those moments of one of these angel people coming up to me and saying, "You're a little stressed out and you're scaring people. You should probably try yoga. So you're a little high strung, sis, go to this yoga class." And so that's when I discovered, oh, I need to not just direct it out of my hands, but physically out of my system and then I purposefully practiced yoga and dance to channel extra energy. I'll just call this life force energy, that when it's not channeled, with me, it comes out as, let's say, negative emotion,
Oh.
becoming overly critical of other people or myself, discontent, being hyper. I suppose somebody would probably call it ADHD now. Maybe I had that when I was a kid. I don't know. I think all kids are ADHD because they're children and they're supposed to be that active. And they're supposed to have that much energy. They're
Yeah.
babies. So that was one moment when I realized with the creativity of my hands, it had to go more with the rest of my body. And then another moment it was right after my mother passed away about 12 years ago, and I wasn't making art, and I wasn't living the life I wanted. I was living somebody else's life.
What
I
were you
was living
doing?
multiple people's lives. At that point, this is again where it gets colorful. At that point, I had a spiritual teacher.
Okay.
And so I was curious to know why the heck did I incarnate in a body, and why am I here, and who am I? And that was great for a while until it wasn't anymore. Until I realized, oh, I've gotten everything I need to out of this teacher and this training and this learning. And now the human body, unless you leave your human body, like completely leave it, in other words, die, this thing has a purpose. My understanding of it, our bodies have a purpose. We're here for a reason.
Right.
Each of us, it's its own unique reason. And as I let go of my own personal reasons for being here, and I kept following somebody else's, whether it was the person I had married or the spiritual teacher or this, that, and the other, discontent frustration, panic attacks,
Mm,
anxiety, depression, all of that stuff. And then when my mom died, I put two and two together. It's like, well, of course I feel this way. I'm not directing out of my body the energy that's supposed to come out of it in the
mm.
form of art and other things that I do. And so then once I cut ties with everything else, made the decision to move towards what was right for me, then a lot of that changed.
Was it? I'm sure it was extremely rewarding and exciting, but was it also kind of scary to, kind of go towards that? Because, I mean, up until that point, you were kind of doing this other thing, kind of probably
Lots
like
of other
what you
things.
think you're supposed to, but it actually wasn't.
Yeah.
Was that kind of a difficult beginning for you to kind of say,
Oh,
okay,
it sucked. Oh my
oh,
God.
really?
It was one of those rock bottom moments, like
Oh,
seriously
wow.
rock bottom. Mom's dead, family fell apart. I had $3 in my pocket, more debt that I would like to actually admit I had at the time. I'm in Hawaii by myself. I don't have the money to move back to the mainland. And at that point, I was just like, well, what the hell do I have to lose? I'll just, figure it out. How do I become an artist and sell my art? And so I gave myself a goal. I said, 3 years, Nadia, you're going to give everything to it. You're going to throw everything at this thing for 3 years. And if at the end of 3 years you're not making any money or any profit and nothing has changed, then we just got to call it quits. I don't know, go find a job someplace and figure it out. And so after 3 years, I was making more money doing that than other things than I had done at that time previously. And so then I gave myself another goal. Okay, another 3 years. If I'm not setting these goals that meeting these goals, then we got to go do something else and figure it out. So,
And
yeah,
and I'm assuming it just continued to
yeah,
happen and more
yeah.
goals. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like when you have no safety net, when I had no safety net, I
Yeah.
had no family, no extended family, no money, and a white girl in Hawaii. So at least it's not that bad being a white girl in Hawaii, but you know,
Well, so now there's two directions or two questions I guess I want to go with. And I feel like either way it's going to take me away from. So I'm going to ask them both so that I don't forget
okay.
them. The first one is, well, why did you decide to move? What brought you to Hawaii in the first place? And then the
Hmm.
second thing is, you said, when you made the decision, okay, I don't know how, but I'm just going to turn art into, my business and make a living off it. So what did you do? Like, because I'm imagining, just from my, I'm not an artist, but if I'm like, if I wanted to pursue art as a career, I would have no idea like where to even start. Like,
Oh,
it's not like, like that is there like
yeah, yeah,
oh, you
yeah,
do X, Y, Z. So
yeah.
yeah,
Heck,
how
even
was
in
your
art
journey?
school, you're not trained that.
Right.
It's the weirdest thing. You come out of art school knowing how to make all this art, but there's zero training on how to make money out of it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's silly that what you don't get in art school.
Right.
You're supposed to be able to get a job after this. I was fortunate because after art school, I did have a job illustrating artifacts, so
Hmm.
I was able to do that. So what brought me to Hawaii was the spiritual teacher I had. He traveled all over the world, and I was a young, idealistic, kid, and I had separated and got a divorce and separated from my husband, and I was ready and self-righteous and ready. I mean, if I'm going to be brutally honest, I was like, I'm going to follow this spiritual teacher and I'll be enlightened and everything will be perfect. And
Mm.
nothing is ever perfect anywhere.
Yeah.
So after, moving to Hawaii and all of that, and after my mom died, I realized, okay, I got everything I needed to out of this thing, and you go do your thing and I'm going to stay here and you travel around and do your thing. This was good. So that's what brought me to Hawaii.
What was it about here that you felt comfortable with saying, okay, we understand how you got here, but for you to
Yeah.
decide, I'll just stay here then? What was it about Hawaii that made you feel like this was the right place to stay?
It's a lot more international than the mainland.
Mm.
I grew up in Europe and Australia as a kid. So I grew up
Oh,
in
wow.
Germany and France, excuse me, Germany and Belgium and Australia. And then I always grew up in other cultures, traveled everywhere. So I'm more comfortable in foreign cultures than America.
Wow.
So it was really
Well,
comfortable for me to stay here because I loved it. I loved the melting pot of different cultures and languages and people and yeah, and then of course the ocean too.
why were you moving around as a child? Was it because of your parents?
Military.
Oh, military. Okay.
My dad was Air Force.
Oh, my mom was Air Force. Well, she
Oh,
says
right.
that, but she goes, "Well, I was a dietitian, so I didn't fly."
Oh, well, she still worked for the Air Force. Yeah, there's a lot
Yeah,
of different
yeah.
things. Yeah, my dad was like traditional Air Force. He was the fighter pilot kind. He was the one
Oh,
that flew the
wow.
loud, scary jets and shot people out of the sky kind of guy.
Holy smokes. And what did
Yeah.
your mom do?
She was a Vietnam War bride. He met her in Australia
Wow.
because she's Australian. She was when she's alive. And so my dad had to move around a lot. So she just
Yeah.
dealt with it.
Wow.
She was just military wife. Good mama.
Fascinating. So when you started to realize like you wanted to go as a high schooler, college, that you wanted to pursue art as, for your studies and assuming that would be your career, w- seeing that you had a father who's fighter pilot and then and your mom with her background, did they understand that and were they supportive, or was it a hard kind of translation for them to realize that, you were
No,
going
no,
towards
my
that?
mother was always supportive when I was little,
Oh, that's great.
always from every step of the way. Probably because I would engage myself
Uh,
in the task, right? I was
yeah.
self-directed that way. And she had the wisdom to know that
Hmm.
where her child is self-directed to is where the child needs to go.
That's
So, and
great.
my dad didn't fuss with that too much. He just wanted to make sure that I got a really well-rounded education, that it couldn't just be about art. There's other things that I needed to learn how to do. And
Hmm.
so, but he's also pretty traditional though. And in some cases, he's fine with my whole life and lifestyle now. But there were moments of, you need to get married and a man is supposed to take care of you and blah, 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 and all that other stuff. I'm like, that doesn't really work anymore. I don't really need that kind of reality anymore for some of us. So, yeah. So,
And so going back to when you made that 3-year goal of pursuing art as a career and making it, a business, what was the first steps in that, and kind of, how did you make that 3-year goal happen?
yeah, great question. So, first of all, I just started making whatever I could make out of wood with these power tools. And I don't even remember what got me into this, but I think I had made myself this little mirror, like cut out a mirror frame, this round, weird organic shape, stuck a mirror behind it because I needed one for my room. And a
Huh.
couple of my friends said, I want one, I want one. So I sold those. And then a friend of mine that runs farmers markets said, well, why don't you sell them at the farmers markets? So I did. So I started making these kind of weird, whimsical, funky wood mirror things. And then after a while, after my hands figured out how to use all the tools and all the different things, then I remembered, oh, for goodness sakes, I'm an artist. I can make anything out of this stuff. What do I want to make? What do I want to turn this into? And then my hands led me. Oh, this is how I would see images in my head and think, well, how do I get this out of my head and into my hands? And then it was trial and error. What if I tried this? What if I tried that? What if I tried that? Um, I didn't watch a single YouTube video. Nothing. Everything was just trial and error. And
Yeah.
then so I would make more and more, and they became more elaborate and more finely tuned and more artistic. And then at that point, I started approaching retail stores. So then I sold some of my things out of multiple different retail stores across the island. And then somebody said, well, why don't you do the Haleiwa Arts Festival? I said, okay. So then I got into the Haleiwa Arts Festival, and I did that for close to 7, 8 years before COVID.
Mm.
And then did all the other, holiday art show, craft fair circuits. So I did the whole art show, craft fair circuit thing for close to 8+ years. And they kept on getting bigger and more elaborate and different and everything else. And then I started getting work doing other things like, oh, we have this wooden table here that we broke. Can you fix it for us? So it's easy to fix things. I know how to put pots back together. That's what I
Yeah.
thought. I can put a pot back together. I can put a table back together, right? So then I started working with some property management companies, just fixing things because
Huh.
it's still woodworking. It's still a piece of wood. The difference is
Yeah.
it's not a piece of art, but if somebody has a beautiful old table and they don't want to toss it because it's been
Mm.
damaged, I go in and fix it up. To me, it's a work of art
Yeah.
and do whatever it takes to make these things better. So it's just started going out and out and out. And then at some point I realized, oh, I miss teaching. I love teaching. And so then I started teaching art to kids at Le Jardin and other places. And that got me out there more as an artist. And then I started approaching art galleries. And then because I had more larger sculptural pieces and the larger shows, the Four Seasons and art galleries. So I got into an art gallery, and I'm still in one on the North Shore. And then at some point, I think it was year 4 or 5, I just knew like I need help. I can't get past this point because I'm not wired to think so linearly.
Mm.
It's very easy for me to sink into a meditative state, hence meditation teacher, see the image I want to create and create it. But
Yeah.
how to create a business plan or a future plan, I don't know how to
Oh,
do that.
that
It's
doesn't
like
sound. Yeah.
nobody taught me how to do that. But on the day, I think it was the week that I decided, damn it, I need help. I got on this, it was the very first day I got on this website. It's called CAFE. It's called Call for Artists.
Mm.
And it's a national, international website where there's calls to artists. You could apply for art shows or galleries or this and that. And I just went straight to grants, fellowships, and what do you call it? Like residencies, art
Mm.
residencies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was this fellowship, and I found, I kid you not, the week I decided, a business accelerator program only for sculptors and painters.
Oh my gosh.
I applied, I got in, I was in the program for 3 years. So basically, I was scholarshiped in for 3 years, and they're based out of
Wow.
Santa Fe in New York City. And I still work with them today as a consultant. So yeah, I did that for a long time. And then I learned from a businesswoman whose father was a professional painter. He taught her how to run the business of being an artist because he was very successful. And she went into the world of business. She put it together. She got grants to teach artists how to grow their businesses.
Wow.
Yeah. So like every step of the way, every time I asked, it's like, I can't do this on my own. I need help. I would find the thing that I needed.
Man, you're just so tapped into something of whether it's manifesting or law of attraction or whatnot. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. And honestly, getting to the point of absolute desperation can change anybody's life, and you can pull stuff to it. So
Mm.
maybe it's a law of attraction. Maybe it's manifestation. Maybe it's just pure drive and need. All of
Hmm.
those wound up into one. But I do know from my experiences with the law of attraction, which comes from the law of vibration, because the primary law is the law of vibration. Secondary law is law of attraction. Anyway, I could geek out on that too. Um, is whenever any person focuses obsessively on one subject or thought or idea or desire, if you focus on that thing so much, at some point it shows up. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That
So that's
explains why so many of these, insanely successful people have just this, it's almost like a crazy, like they cannot let it
It's
go, right?
obsessive, and it
Yeah,
can be
yeah,
considered crazy or nutty or unnerving or uncomfortable to be around, with a
yeah,
certain mind that can be, it's almost an addictive behavior to be to drill down so much on one thing. But based on results, you get results and it works.
yeah.
So
You mentioned that, you get, when you're working on, the wood sculptures, like you had a vision in your mind, and that's how you're trying to figure out how to make that come out through your hands. Is that how you, like, because I'm imagining all of the different kind of uh pieces that you've created and such. uh there's so many times when I'll see artwork, I'm like, how did they come up with this? Like, where does it come from? Is it something for your process that you actually can visualize how it looks, or is it more of like there's just kind of a start of a path where you're just like, oh, let me just go here and kind of
nope.
work your
I
way
see the
through it?
finished product.
Wow,
Up here, I see a complete finished product, color, texture, shape, size, everything pretty
that's
quickly.
crazy. Where
And
does
then I
it
have
come
to
from?
go, oh my God, how do I make that?
Yeah.
There have been so many times I'm like, for real? I'm supposed to make that? And sometimes I make things that are bigger and heavier than I am. And
Wow.
I'm pretty short. I'm like 5'3", and so like, this thing is huge. Oh gosh. So I'm sorry, but I missed that last question you asked.
No,
So where
I was
does it
asking.
come from?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Nolan, where does anything creative come from?
I don't know. I guess
Okay.
just your brain. I'm assuming your imagination, but
Okay, imagination. Where does the imagination come from?
I'm not sure. I guess
Okay.
your spirit, your
So,
soul.
okay. The soul. Where does the soul come from?
Man, I feel like you're doing your archaeological dig, but on my on my brain.
I'm doing it on purpose because where does creativity come from? For real, where does somebody come up with an idea of an object that's never existed before on the planet? Where did Edison get the idea for an incandescent light bulb? Where the heck did that come from? I truly believe that every human, not just a few, every single human being can connect to a something greater than ourselves. We talked about it before we even started, right? The sense of
Hmm.
divinity, divine, God, whatever that thing is to you, entity, real or not, that's source. That's mana. That's
Mm.
energy. Where does that energy come from? Where did the thought for a computer chip come from? How did the Wright brothers figure out how to fly? Who created, the cell phone? Multitude. Oh gosh, I'm going to find this quote and I'm going to email to you. Darn it, it's in my truck. Okay, so I've got a quote. It's like where I'm going to paraphrase it and butcher it too at the same time. Something along the lines, you know who Napoleon Hill was?
No.
He was a guy that wrote a book, Think and Grow Rich. Anyway, for those of you in your audience that knows who Napoleon Hill is, they'll know the book. And he drilled it down to like this great pulse of energy, chi, mana within our planet, the solar system, all of existence, this great pulse of life force energy. It comes through a human mind, it comes through human hands, and then we create an object through that. So that's where I became obsessed then with, well, where does creativity come from, and why do some people are only creative and why are some people not creative, and what happens to a human mentally and emotionally going full circle back to myself,
Mm,
what happens to a human mentally and emotionally where that creativity is intentionally or unintentionally stunted?
wow.
Stunted through
Yeah.
trauma, stunted through daddy saying, you're not supposed to do this. And so that's why now I teach people how to do art therapy, because now I've taken all these tools from the last 40 plus years of being alive, squished it all together. I'm like, you can do this on yourself to figure out where your creativity comes from inside of you.
That's so interesting. And that's what I was wanting to ask you about next, because you said that you went into teaching because you had missed it. And I didn't even realize that you had done teaching in your stories. I didn't
Yeah.
hear anything about that. So where did that come from? Because, and the reason why it's interesting to me to see that you explain so much about how working through with your hands to use that to kind of keep that flow of energy going for you, when then I hear teaching, which seems like something so different from that, where you're
Oh,
not, you know, it's a different flow of energy. And so
yeah.
it's interesting how you have the two. So I was
Yeah.
curious about where a little bit of, if you could explain
Yeah,
kind
where
of where
that
that
comes from.
came.
First
Yeah.
of all, just to explain, every time I look over, I have a cat perched on a very small surface. And every time I look over, he's about to fall off. So I'm kind of supporting him so he doesn't fall off the desk and make a loud thump. He's a big kitty, but he still thinks he's that big. Teaching. Okay. So as an artist, isolation is a thing. I get to go inside a lot, and I've got to spend a bit of time alone making the stuff I make. While
Mm,
on one hand, that can be great. On another hand, that can be really isolating. So I choose to teach to be around more people. And I just genuinely love teaching. I love teaching kids how to make art. I love teaching adults how to use art therapy to get them where they need to be. And so teaching to me it's as natural to me as making art is. I don't know where that
wow.
comes from. I didn't get any teaching certifications. I've just taught things at different levels my whole life.
And do you feel that that same experience kind of keeps that, uh, almost like keeps you in balance of being able to let out
Yeah,
that creative
absolutely.
energy?
Yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah.
giving back, that focusing on somebody else and assisting somebody else, being supportive that way. I love helping people. I love being supportive. And so that's a way where I can be extremely supportive to different individuals without it becoming imbalanced,
Yeah.
right? To give back.
Can you share a little bit as to what goes into when you say that you teach people how to do art therapy? Can you
Yeah.
explain what art therapy is, and how that works in for the people that you work with?
Yeah. So my understanding and my own personal lens with art therapy is not the same kind of lens you would get from somebody who is a psychologist or psychiatrist that's trained to use art therapy in a clinical setting.
Gotcha.
Because I don't have any of that training, I can't speak to it that way. And that requires
Hmm.
certain degrees and certificates that I don't claim to have. I don't have them.
Hmm.
But being an artist and knowing what art does to a human being to alleviate suffering, and having done it for myself and multiple students and clients for years, based on results, it absolutely works. So, what is art therapy to me? That is using specific drawing and creative techniques to give the person a mental break, to be able to step back. So, in other words, yeah, let me talk about this one particular client without names or anything like that.
Okay.
This woman experienced a certain trauma from being separated from her son. And as any mom that would listen to this or anybody that has children, you have children, right?
Yeah.
Being separated from your child in a way where it's out of your control, what does that do to your psyche,
Yeah.
your
That's
psychological state? What would that do to you up here? And
yeah.
in your body, in your flesh, right? Your nervous system is on hyper alert, hyper vigilance, and has to be on full tilt all the way, all the time, until you can get your child back. So in discussions with this person, in this, as they would call it, she called it a trauma loop. I'm just stuck in this trauma loop. I can't get out. And I'm so tired all the time, and I can't think clearly, and I just don't feel good, and my body hurts, and I'm just exhausted, and all of this other list of, I just want to be creative and explore and give more energy out, but I'm so depleted from this
Mm-hmm.
experience that I have nothing left to give. And at the same time, if I don't start giving, in other words, being creative in the way that she chooses to, she feels like her life has been wasted
Mm.
or was. And so through this cumulative series of drawing and writing exercises that I have her do over a period of 12 weeks, it turns around the tide of that. It cuts that trauma loop over and over and over
Mm.
again, because you're going up here into your brain and you're making those neural pathways. The brain is electricity and water. As a brain scientist once said, we have this giant squishy fish between our ears and a big water aquarium up here, and it's protected by the skull. We've got this big fish tank between our ears, and it runs on electric pulses. When you think a certain way for a long enough period of time, that electric pulse becomes dominant.
Mm.
If you're overly stressed or concerned about something, that takes up beachfront property in your brain, and it becomes forefront, it becomes dominant, it becomes the thing that subconsciously moves you through life. Even if it's horrible and feels bad and you don't want it to, it's still the driver. It takes over the driver's seat. So there are multitudes of ways to get one to switch what's controlling in that driver's seat, right? There's talk therapy, there's different forms of PTSD therapy, there's a multitude of ways. It's not just art therapy is the only way. But in this particular situation, since she's already a creative person,
Mm-hmm.
it works, and it worked because she does these exercises for 20 to 60 minutes every single day, 7 days a week for 12 weeks. We're starting to take the dominant force that's been driving her, this anxiety, this fear, this pain, this longing, this terror, this,
Yeah.
all of this stuff that's driven her. It tricks it and triggers all of that to take a back seat. And then what comes into the brain, the neural pathways, are the parts of our nervous system that are already hardwired to relax and slow down, to put the brakes on. It's that parasympathetic part of the nervous system that allows us to. So it creates space for
Mm.
that part of the nervous system to come in. And then that part of the nervous system learns how to become dominant again. So that then there's a balance between this fight, flight, fawn, freeze state and a more calm, present, at peace, at ease, central nervous system is relaxed state.
Mm-hmm.
So she got those tools and she practiced them over and over and over again, and she was able to turn the tides. Does the trauma state still on occasion pop up? Why, yes, it does. Of course it does. If
Mm-hmm.
anybody has been affected by anything externally, it's going to, on occasion, to come up and turn in and rear its ugly head. But the purpose of me teaching her how to do this herself is so now she has this cool toolkit when I'm out of the picture to continue to do it on her own. So I tell my clients, no matter what happens after I'm gone, you still have these tools and you don't need me anymore. So for people that have had the same therapist for the last 30 years, come on, no, we don't have to do it that way. That's an old paradigm of working. Teach your client how to do it to themselves. Let them fish for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
that's what I do.
yeah, no, it's fascinating, and it makes so much sense. And you brought up like it doesn't mean that the trauma doesn't come back and it doesn't, still rear itself. But what I love is that what you've enabled and given the tools to the people that you work
Yes.
with is that it doesn't just overtake them and dominate
Right.
their energy and their life. It's
Yeah.
they now know how to process that
In
that
some
trauma.
ways. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
right.
it's like that relying on somebody. It's this whole thing of needing to rely constantly on somebody or something outside of yourself to have the answers to your problems or questions.
Hmm. And that's got to
This,
be so empowering to know that you do possess that
yeah, you
yourself.
do.
Yeah.
Every single human being actually possesses that within themselves. We all knew that as little people.
Yeah.
We were hardwired that way. You're still, Nolan, hardwired that way. But
Hmm.
where do we get taught these things?
At school. No.
No, not at
I'm just
school.
kidding.
No. None of us are given this kind of emotional intelligence training.
Oh no, no, I meant
Yeah.
they can get hardwired to not like
To
to
not,
take us
yeah,
to not
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
School, that's where we were hardwired not to,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like I feel like this in our culture now, there is a culture of many people wanting to get their power back in themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I still have a therapist that I go see on occasion. It's a specific kind, and it's specifically for specific kinds of trauma. So I'm constantly releasing it from my body. But every day I do my own level of art therapy exercises too to constantly be training my nervous system. I'm safe. I'm
Mm.
okay. I'm good. I'm safe. I can get myself back into a safe place without drugs, without alcohol, without reliance on a cell phone, without scrolling, without thinking constantly there's something outside of me that can fix me.
Yeah. That really resonates with me because when I started my journey in learning more about my traumas and my
Yeah.
mental health, um, in the early stages, all I kept thinking about was like, what kind of medications are out there? What kind of things can, I ingest, or things that, that would fix it for me. And what
Right.
I learned through the process was the only thing that really can fix it for me is me. Like I have to go through it and actually
So good.
do the work and process it and experience it. It's
Yeah.
not, there's no magic pill that just erases it and makes me numb to
Pills
it and it's gone,
pills
right?
just mask it. It's like it's
Yeah.
a band-aid. And at some point the band-aid gets old, gnarly, pussy and gross and falls off. And then the
And then
stuff
it's a
comes
worse
out
problem. Yeah.
sideways,
Yeah.
right? That's what we see on the mainland with so many young people with guns and
Yeah.
confusion and just it comes out in ways that are non-productive to themselves and non-productive to society.
Hmm.
That's why I'm passionate about creativity because everybody has a creative drive within them. And I don't care if it's creativity for cooking, for painting a car. A girlfriend of mine said the other day, I was like, oh my God, I'm just dying to start a podcast like you. I love interviewing people. And I'm encouraging you, got to go that direction, go that, because that's the way you're expressing
Hmm.
your creativity. It doesn't have to be a painting or a sculpture or anything like that. Just whatever that expression is for you, how do you get it out?
Yeah. I think that's what's really great is that people are starting to realize that, like you said, when we used to think creativity or art, we just imagine paintings or drawing, but
Yeah, yeah,
there's just this whole wide variety of ways that, and
yeah.
avenues it can go. And it's really amazing. And I feel like And maybe, you could either correct me or agree, but it almost feels like to me that what came from the pandemic seems to be an even more greater appreciation for what you're describing. And I'm wondering if you've seen that coming as we're coming out of the pandemic, that there seems to be more of a hunger and a desire to pursue things like art therapy, like expression, and like harnessing your creativity, and really looking outside of what was kind of, we were boxed into thinking like this is how life is and how you are supposed to pursue it. Do you think that you've noticed that, or seen that in from your perspective?
Absolutely. A large chunk of humanity was stuck inside for a long period of time without too many distractions. So
Yeah.
that means you come face to face with whatever things you're avoiding, whatever stuff
Hmm.
inside that needs to be attended to, that hasn't been attended to, with distractions on the outside, playing, family, whatever it is. Yeah, it was, I mean, as crazy as this sounds, what a beautiful experience for
Yeah.
humanity to freaking stop
Yeah.
and look and go, okay, is this what I really want? Is this, is this the life that I want? And I know for myself, I loved that moment. Okay, I'm going to make some big changes. This is not the direction I want to take my art business. I want it different places. So, yeah, I think there is a hunger for, let me think of the right word, a hunger, a longing
Mm.
to follow one's desires, to follow
Yeah.
one's bliss, for whatever that thing or activity is that lights you up personally,
Hmm.
right? To follow that. That's necessary. It's not a luxury. It's actually a necessary part of being human. When that's
Yeah.
denied, oh God, you know, when it's, what happens when that's denied. You've seen people that are like the Walking Dead zombies,
Mm.
whether it's through just going into mental hibernation or drugs or alcohol or
Yeah.
other things to distract oneself. So, and there are tools, and they're not that difficult to do. It just requires attention and focus and dedication for a little while. Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, as far as trying to find those things, and as you mentioned, finding your bliss, um, how can people learn more about your services, whether they can find bliss in your art, or find bliss in your art therapy, or with your children's
Give them,
teaching art, like,
give me
yeah.
their children so they can go take a break so they can
Yeah,
help.
right. That's a blissful moment right
It
there, I'll
is.
tell you
Yeah. How
what.
old are your kids?
13 and 15,
Oh, that's
so
right. You told me that. Yes.
yeah.
So let's start first of all with the kid one. So actually, in
Right.
a week and a half, when public school spring break is, I have spring break art camp. So I still have a couple of spots left, ages 3 to 6, 7 to 12. The parents throw me their children for 3 hours Monday through Friday, so that they, like a mama said, she's like, I'm going to go surf at Makapu for 3 hours. Like, okay, sis, you go do your thing. And I'm going to, myself and my co teacher, we teach these kids how to make different kinds of art. So that's one way parents specifically can find me.
Yeah.
If they have an artistic child or just extremely active child, my art studio is out on a farm, so they get to run around like little wild animals.
Wow.
So that's one thing. I'm actually actively right now seeking a few more students to come take the classes, and I'll email you and all that information too. So if there is
Awesome.
anybody that wants, or if you know anybody in your community that has children like that, they can register for the spring break art camp. That's
How
one
cool is
way.
that to do art camp on a farm? Like,
Yeah.
that's like the coolest thing I've ever heard. Because when we think,
It's
oh, go to art school, like you think, oh, in a classroom, but you're
Yeah.
out in the farm. My
You're
gosh, like
outside. I
how
mean,
cool
heck,
is
it's in
that?
Waimanalo. Everything is a farmer's
Yeah.
market. So yeah,
Wow.
I'm blessed to be in a location where it's very agriculture agrarian, and so I have a pretty tight space where the kids can run around, and I teach them how to behave around the sheep and the chickens, and there's fish in a little pond, so they get to learn responsibilities and to be in tune with nature. And
Hmm.
that's what we do in between the art lessons. So we do the art lessons and then they go out and play. And a lot of times the kids, they find iguanas and they find things. And
Oh
I
my
had one
gosh.
little boy try and go home with a whole bottle of tadpoles. Ugh. But, you know, everybody's got their thing. So that's one way people can find me. If they have children that have a lot of extra energy, send them to me.
Yeah.
Another way, simply Instagram is one of the best ways to see the art that I make. I
Oh yeah.
consider it a portfolio of what I do.
Mm.
Through Instagram, Nadia Fairlamb Art, you get directed to my website where you'll see all the other work I do.
Yeah.
And then
Awesome.
with the art therapy, that is through basically a consultation basis. So through the
Gotcha.
advertising I do, I offer consultation calls to figure out if we're a good fit, to see if what
Mm.
I do is actually the best thing for them, or if
Yeah.
there's another route that that person needs to go down. And I have a whole library of resources.
Oh,
So
neat.
the other day I came across somebody and we talked and I was like, you know what I offer, you need actually a different kind of therapy first and then come to me and we can work together. So I'm not always the solution, but I am a solution. And
Yeah.
so what I'd like to offer for your audience while they listen is I do these creativity breakthrough sessions and I can send you the link. And if anybody would like to do one, it's complimentary, free for your audience. And if anybody would like to do one, they can schedule themselves and we can chat and see if what I do is best for them.
That's awesome. Well, so I'll get all of the information from you and these links, and I'll put them into the show notes and
Yeah.
the show description. So that way everyone can, whichever one of these routes,
One of the three.
yeah, is the
If
route
you
to your
want.
bliss, then you'll have the access to it.
The bliss of owning art, the bliss of releasing your children, and the bliss of healing things inside of yourself that need a little bit of TLC.
Yeah, that's a lot of bliss. So,
It's a lot of bliss. Maybe I should just call myself like, I don't know, what should I call it? The bliss machine.
yeah, I love it. Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, go and copyright that.
Right? Trademark it now.
Well, Nadia, this has been so wonderful. I was looking so forward to this conversation, and I'm so glad that we finally had it. And when you had told me, like, got a lot of experiences and back, I had no idea that I would be able to. I didn't know where this would go, and it did not disappoint. It was
Oh,
awesome. Thank
good,
you.
good, good. Hopefully your people that watch and listen will be entertained.
Oh, I'm sure they will. And I think the best part of this all is just to see how beautiful of a soul you are, in that here you are, how you've been able to marry not only understanding yourself and how you can be best for yourself, but now how you've also taken that and giving that gift to others, and so that others can do the same. And so I just love that you've taken your blessings and your gifts to make the world a better place, to help those around you in your community. And that's why I think it was so important for me to have you on here, because for people like yourself, I think we need to put more of a spotlight and give people like yourself more access to doing the incredible work that you're doing.
Oh,
So thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to share. It's a treat to give it out to others and to let other people know how many options there are out there,
Yeah.
and that absolutely essential figure out and find out, and don't hesitate to run headlong towards those things that light you up.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Because what
I love it.
makes me geek out on stuff is not going to be what somebody else does. So, but what they do is absolutely essential to them. It's important
Yeah.
to your mind, your psyche, your soul,
Yeah.
your sense of well-being. And if that's cut off, then your sense of well-being gets it's so shaken. And there's enough of that. We've had enough of that on this planet,
Hmm.
and there's humans have a way to connect to everybody now at the
Yeah.
same time. So shame on us for not sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, Nadia, thank you so much. I'm so glad that Dr. Rachel got us connected.
Mhm.
And again, for those who are interested in connecting with Nadia, all of her links will be in the show notes and the descriptions. But if you are too lazy and don't want to click on any of that, you can just easily access her through her website, nadiafairlambart.com, or Instagram, same thing, right? Nadia Fairlamb Art. So
Yep.
no
And she's
excuses. She's super accessible. You can find her.
yeah, there's
And
not that many Nadia Fairlambs on the
yeah.
planet. So yeah. Okay.
So thank you so much, Nadia. And I'm excited to, continue to follow you on all of the
Thank
incredible
you.
things you're doing. And yeah, thank you again.
Of course. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.